All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to put on our venture capitalist hats and really dig into a startup idea called Test Sprite. And the question we're asking is simple, but the stakes, they're huge. Is this a billion-dollar company in the making? Let's dive into the source material and find out.
So to get our answer, we've got a 5-step game plan. First, we'll need to understand what's called the developer's agony. Then we'll check out the AI-powered escape. After that, we'll map out the competitive battlefield, size up that billion-dollar prize, and finally deliver the verdict. Let's get right into it.
First up, the developer's agony. You know, every billion-dollar company starts by solving a real, painful problem. So before we even glance at the product, our first job is to validate the pain. Is it a real thing? And, more importantly, is it big enough to build a massive business on top of? So let's start with the core question here. We all know that in software, speed is everything. You have to be fast. But what's that one bottleneck that just consistently grinds everything to a halt for development teams? And our source material points a finger directly at one culprit: manual testing. Now, this isn't just a theory. This comes straight from developers who are in the trenches doing the work. They call manual quality assurance, or QA, a major slowdown. It literally stops them from shipping software. It's a fundamental roadblock. And you can really feel the frustration in this quote. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. One developer calls it a 45-minute hell. Think about that. This repetitive process doesn't just slow things down a bit, it obliterates productivity. That kind of emotional weight, that's just as important as the time lost.
Wow, and this slide really puts that time cost into perspective. So let's move from the stories to the hard data. Our source points to a study with a pretty stunning comparison. For a developer to manually track down a software bug, it can take 20 hours. But with automation, as you can see, that plummets to just 35 minutes. That is a massive, massive leap in efficiency.
So the takeaway here is just undeniable. The pain is real. The source material is so sure about this, it gives the problem a 9.5 out of 10 score. This is not some small nagging issue. It's a deep, proven bottleneck for the entire software industry. All right, so we've established there's this huge, raging fire of a problem. So what's the fire extinguisher? Let's dive into the proposed solution, a little something called Test Sprite. And here it is. Test Sprite is being pitched as an AI agent that lives right inside developers' main workspace, their coding environment, or IDE. It's designed to attack those pain points we just talked about head-on by automating the whole shebang, generating tests, running them, and even fixing them. It all works in this simple but really powerful 3-step loop. So, as a developer is writing code, Test Sprite automatically generates the tests they need. Then, it runs those tests right there in the editor. And, here's the magic, if a test fails, it figures out the problem and tries to fix it, all without the developer ever having to switch context. And here's the core claim, the big result. Look at this. With Test Sprite, the pass rate for AI-generated code jumps from a pretty shaky 42% all the way up to a rock-solid 93%. That's more than doubling the reliability. That is a huge leap forward. Of course, a great idea and a great product, well, they aren't enough if the market's already flooded. An idea is only as good as its ability to compete. So, how does Test Sprite stack up against the players already on the field? Well, the key insight from the analysis is that the market is fragmented. You've got lots of tools that do one piece of the puzzle. Some generate tests, others help with automation, but they're all kind of siloed off. No one else is offering that complete end-to-end automation loop right inside the developer's workspace. And that fragmentation, that creates a massive strategic opening. Let's just look at a few examples to see what I mean. You have players like DiffBlue, which is great for generating tests for Java, but it's not a real-time assistant. Then there's TestM, which focuses on user interface tests, a totally different part of the process. And even a direct competitor like Unit Test AI, which does work in the IDE, it only generates tests. It doesn't have that crucial run and fix autonomous loop. Test Sprite is really carving out its own unique space here. Okay, so we have a validated pain, a really compelling solution, and a clear competitive advantage. But is the market big enough? Let's talk money. Let's talk about the size of the prize. First, the total addressable market, or TAM. Our source puts this number at a staggering $36.8 billion. That's the entire global market for software test automation.
To put it simply, that's the size of the entire pond they get to fish in. It's huge.
But let's zoom in. The Serviceable Addressable Market, or SAM, is the slice of that pie that TestBright can realistically go after, specifically developer-facing AI testing tools. And that slice? It's still a massive $6.63 billion.
And finally, let's bring it all the way down to earth. The Serviceable Obtainable Market, or SOM. This is a realistic first target for a startup like this. And at $66.3 million, it's not just a pipe dream. It's an attractive and achievable goal that makes this whole massive opportunity feel very, very real.
So, we've seen the pain, the solution, the competition, and the massive market prize. After weighing all the evidence from our source material, what's the final verdict? Is this a go?
The verdict from our source is crystal clear. Absolutely pursue this startup idea. The analysis concludes that TestSprite obliterates the agony of manual testing and is poised to capture a colossal market ripe for disruption. I mean, as far as validation goes, it really doesn't get much stronger than that.
And that brings us to our final thought. The analysis strongly validates the TestSprite concept, but the implications are even bigger than just one company. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. What happens to innovation, to competition, to the very fabric of our digital world when developers are truly unleashed to ship as fast as they can code?